going on, traders? It's Ricky with Technical Solutions. Thank you guys again for joining us for another helpful video. So for today's video, as you guys can see by the title, I'm going to be talking about some experiences that I've had being a landlord. I know a lot of you guys, especially at a very early age, that are looking into investment property. Something that you guys are going to have to deal with are tenants. And you know, what's my experience with tenants? I'm just going to be talking about my own experience and kind of like what has led to my success and, you know, some mistakes that I made. So right off the bat, the first property that I ended up buying, I go to the ASU Polytechnic campus, which is very close to this, you know, sole investment property that I live in right now, and then I rented out two of the bedrooms. I rented out two of the bedrooms to my only two friends at that school. One of the first guys was Phil, and he's this guy that you guys see all the time in my videos. That's always like, you know, super funny and, you know, and very animated. And then we have Joel. We call him Swole Joy. He's my second friend that I ended up meeting because of Phil. He was actually Phil's roommate at, you know, the ASU Polytechnic campus beforehand. And then they joined me and, you know, we started living. Obviously this house is a lot nicer than the housing at the ASU Polytechnic campus, and we became like, you know, best buds. And my experience with them has been amazing, nonstop. You know, we've always been working together when it comes down to like, you know, just having fun, being buddies, as well as, you know, when it comes down to like investment opportunities, we always, you know, try to find new ways on how to make money and stuff like that. And I've always been able to share that specific kind of experience with each one of them. So it's been a true blessing, right? So for them, my first investment property, everything was, you know, 100% solid. Now let's go ahead and talk about my second house that I ended up buying. I bought my second house maybe like 6 months or 8 months later after I purchased my first property. And it came down to, I ended up finding these tenants because of Phil. They were Phil's friends, and Phil's, you know, again, very animated, he's very outgoing, and he makes friends with everyone. So there's these 4 individuals that ended up living because it was a 4-bedroom house. Again, I own the house right next door, and like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with these individuals, like, or not all of them, but pretty much what happened was, I knew right away that it's just the mindset here at this house that we live in. I mean, we don't party, it's very calm, and we're always working, right? We always have set things to go. The house next door, they're, you know, some were younger, some were a little bit older, some were into partying, some were not, some were in frats, some were not. So you can only imagine that I knew parties were going to be inevitable when it came down to that specific household. I was not prepared for what actually happened. So that's the first thing. Something I could have done much better is I could have like limited the amount of like just activities and stuff like that they could have done. But overall, it was, I learned a lot within my first year of renting out that property to them, because I've experienced so many hiccups through that rental property. But one of the biggest things that I'm going to be focusing on today is, like, you know, I can talk about my good experiences all the time, but you guys, I guess, don't really care about that. You know, we really just want to focus on, like, you know, what not to do. So one of my biggest mistakes was, first of all, I formulated a lease agreement with these specific individuals, and I did not limit the liability when it came down to like throwing parties and stuff like that. And that should have been something, you know, that I should have just formed right away and made it, you know, strictly clear that, you know, we live in a residential property, and obviously all these parties and different things that they're throwing were not in terms of what I wanted to be done in that household. And that's something that I learned, and then now preparing the next set of lease agreements, that's definitely something that I have prepared and set for these upcoming tenants. Now, one of the other things that I experienced was there's this individual that couldn't really afford, you know, the house, right? He wanted to live with the rest of the buds that were at that location, but couldn't really afford it. So I gave him a reduced pricing for him to be able to do work, meaning that I was going to have work for him to do around the house or just for me, and it would pay a form or a cut of the overall, you know, rent that he'd have to pay. The biggest mistake was that I was going to have to work with him to set up, you know, what it was that he was going to have to do month after month and make sure that he gets it done. That was my first mistake. The reason I say that was this individual, you know, first of all, was not really wanting to work. It was more like he just wanted to live in the house. And then after he got all settled, he had so many excuses on why he couldn't do any work, and it just became impossible. Again, it was a very small amount that he was working for because of how busy I was and because of how many things I had to do. It just wasn't worth the time for myself to actually like bother with it. And it became very frustrating after 6 months and seeing no work to be done, and then having this individual always just, you know, not paying on time, always having excuses on, you know, of certain things around the household. And the biggest thing was I went out of my way to try to make this deal or like possibility happen for him, And this individual, because of who he is and his values, just did not respect that at all. He didn't want to work for it. He just didn't want to work with me. And that's fine, but it's not fine when it comes down to my role as the landlord. And that was one of the most frustrating things. He wasn't willing to work for the rent, and that was my mistake. I should have not gone out of my way to make a deal happen for a specific individual, especially knowing that this person wasn't the most motivated individual. And with all due respect, I mean, it was just, I will never, because of that my own experience, I will never go out of my way from this point forward for a tenant to try to work with them, because it's just not worth my time. They come up with so many excuses on why they can't pay, or why it arrived late, or they end up coming up with all these lies that just end up making it not worth it. So this individual ended up having to leave early. Came down to there was a cancellation payment, and he had to split it up into certain payments, something that I wasn't even supposed to do, but I did it because it came out to his financial situation. So I went out of my way again to try to make it work for him. Again, I already had this horrible experience with him, but I was like, look, I'm gonna try to end it on a good note and try to work with you. It was, again, another mistake. I went out of my way to try to make it work for him. He wouldn't pay me on time. He'd make up excuses on why he didn't have to pay for other certain fees that were completely explained. And then he went and reached out to his parents, which I had no, affiliation with, because my lease agreement was signed with that individual. And he had his mom reach out to me and came up with excuses on, well, this individual told me, or my son told me that, he didn't say any of that. And it was kind of like a he said, I said type of thing, and I'm going to believe my son, and what you're doing isn't right and stuff like that. And it was just complete BS. Again, not worth my time for the small amount of money that I was receiving of net profit. And for this individual to, again, just waste my time and not make it worth it. That's one of the biggest things. It's when it comes down to you trying to treat a property as a business, right? Trying to maximize. The whole point of having rental properties is because it's passive income, that you don't have to do much work, right? That it manages itself and then it appreciates in value. But when you deal with these specific individuals that make it so difficult and such a negative experience, you definitely learn a lot, and you learn a lot to what not to do. And I will never go out of my way to make anything work for a specific tenant, because if they can't make it happen at that specific moment, I'm just not going to work with it because of that specific individual. And it's so sickening that this individual will lie, go out of his way, and manipulate his family as well, just so he doesn't have to pay a small amount of fees that he was aware of when it came down to him moving out. And it just comes down to the specific individual that you're, renting out to. There's always going to be the good ones and the bad ones. And unfortunately, because of the bad ones, we have to protect ourselves. And that's why I ended up having to, get in contact with a lawyer, make sure that everything was, properly said. So if I experience anything like that ever again, that I am at least protected with all the assets that it is that I have. And it's just so frustrating that, I wanted to do something good for an individual, and then they stab you in the back, or they make it make it such a bad experience because I have such little time that they know I can't dedicate time to, make it work for them. And they always come up with excuses, always lie on why they can't make it happen. And it's just so frustrating. It's just a bad experience, and it's not worth your time. And then that's when I was kind of thinking, I was like, wow, these rental properties are not even worth it. I'm not even receiving the return that I wanted to when it comes down to the time that I dedicated. If I didn't have that individual in that household, it would have been a much more pleasant experience, because not only did he promote a negative environment with me, but with the rest of the household as well. And that's not something that I want to associate myself with. And that's why now I'm so selective with the people that I rent out for. I'd much rather not even have an individual out of the 4 bedrooms. I'd much rather have 3 bedrooms just only rented out and have an office than have another individual like that is literally just dragging the house down and making the whole experience of having a rental property such a negative experience. So one of the big suggestions that I can have when it comes down to you being a landlord and buying your first investment properties is be selective to the tenants you choose to rent out to. Become knowledgeable on what their intentions are when they're living in that specific household. And when it comes down to working for them, it's up to you if you want to justify. I don't want to say don't go out of your way to work for them, but just really take into considerations in worst case scenario what can happen and if it's going to be worth your time. That's just based on my experience, and I just thought I'd share with you guys. But most importantly, I don't want to discourage anyone when it comes down to investment properties, because obviously it is a very type of profitable market, and I don't want to subjugate that, but it just comes down to when you do deal with these troll tenants, that it's just not worth it whatsoever. And I'm never going to go out of my way to make it happen, or make it happen or make it worth it for an individual that isn't just that can't really meet the requirements or criteria that I'm trying to meet, because if they can't meet it at the very beginning, it's going to be much more difficult for them to, you know, meet it much later when the demand or when the hype is all out. So overall, just thought I'd share that experience with you guys. I know a lot of you guys have been asking me to make a video with my experiences with my tenants. Unfortunately, just I wasn't as close with my previous tenants as I was or I'm going to be with these new ones. And I'm just really pumped for this upcoming like new lease agreement, because I have a good amount of buddies that I'm going to be working with that are going to be next door, and a lot of them are a part of TechButt Solutions. So now I have 2 households that are going to be based off of, you know, just me networking and housing motivated individuals. I still have 1 bedroom left, and that's really what, you know, I just have 1 bedroom, and I'm going to house another entrepreneur, I think there. Hopefully he goes to ASU or something like that. And it comes down to something that simple. I just really want to house people that are like-minded and not people that are going to bring you down, because then it's not even worth the time nor the money. So I hope you guys learned something. If you guys did, please feel free to give it a thumbs up. If there's anything that I can do, you know, feel free to reach out to me. All the links are down below to be a part of TechButt Solutions. So the link is down below if you want to jump onto a one-to-one video call consultation with me. And I'd be more than happy to, you know, just talk about my best practices in whatever market it is that you want to be talking about. But most importantly, guys, when it comes down to wanting to be successful in anything, make sure that you're driven by your passion, and that's expressed through the work and the hard work that you put out. Like always, guys, let's make sure that we end the year on a green note. Take care.